No, you're perfect. I've got you and the slides, so it's running.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get today's session started. As soon as Mary Grace sits down. All right. I was going to say, I thought I heard footsteps.
There's Ashley.
Ken wasn't able to be here today, so I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. And I'm going to read off my cheat sheets. I apologize. So Lisa is here from Northland College. Lisa Williamson, she's the director of the Sponsored Award Development Administration. Northland recently expanded their efforts with their externally sponsored projects and programs, which have increased by more than 200% in the last 5 years. So I feel like she's going to have some really solid information for us. No pressure, though.
Pressure's on.
Within this context, she'll explain some terms and concepts that'll help us at Gogivic expand in this area. And she's going to cover what she calls the 5 relatively easy steps to grant writing success and how to measure that success. And we're also going to have questions and conversation. And Lisa indicated she's fine with questions during the presentation as well as questions and answers after. So as you're going along, if people have questions, they're welcome to just go ahead and ask the questions. So with that, I will let you go ahead and do your project. So thank you. Did everybody get handouts?
These are all helpful articles to read and things that I'll refer to as I'm talking. So.
And we'll send a few up to Houghton as well. So.
Well, this is a nice small group, so I think we can have more of a conversation than a presentation. And because it's a small group, I'd love to know who each of you are and what you do and what you're hoping to learn or find out about what I have to say about grants and grant pursuits. So, turn it back maybe, or?
I'm Mary Grace Loretti. I work in nursing faculty, and I've written grants in the past in prior jobs. And I'm always interested in free money for causes that are near and dear to me.
I'm Karen Valiant. I'm also nursing faculty. And we're looking at, there's always things that we need, and we're looking at like simulation, equipment, things like that. So we're hoping to kind of find some resources and be a little bit, I've never really done much with grant writing, but just kind of see how that process goes, and hopefully we can be successful with that.
There's never a lack of need, that's for sure.
I'm Nicole Roan. I'm the director of Allied Health. And so exactly what she said is why I'm here also, because we are in need of funds for equipment.
I'm Jean Gray. I'm the dean of students here at Gogivic, and just looking for ways to find different programs or different opportunities for our students.
I'm Ashley Paquette, the Director of Human Resources, and similar, looking for new opportunities.
I'm Terry Triviano. I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I volunteer a lot at the school in Leismer, so just trying to find money for the students.
We're all looking for money.
I'm Gail Maslico. I'm adjunct here, and I also work as diabetes educator at the hospital in Okanagan. And I've always wanted to know more about grant writing. It seems like every aspect I'm in, grants come up. I was just at a meeting yesterday for Updawn, and they're talking about grant monies and being able to write grants. So I've always felt short in that area.
It's a nice mix of faculty and staff and community members. So, and I've worked in, I'll just tell you a little bit. This is what we're going to talk about today. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. So this would. There we go. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and then I thought I would talk in terms of what we've been doing at Northland College for the last 5 years, and because we've been pretty successful, as Kelly said, in building this aspect of our institution. And then within that, I'll sort of embed some helpful terms that you're going to come across as you're pursuing grants, and maybe you already have. And then, as Kelly said, we'll go through these. I took a grant writing class years and years ago, and I remember the instructor said that grant writing was not that hard, that there were 3 elements to it. There was research, writing, and following directions. And most of us can do that. I've added a couple steps to that. I think that you need cultural support at your institution in order to develop this part of grant writing, what you want to do. And secondly, there's a lot more planning involved than writing. The grant writing sounds kind of, is the sexy, fun part. It's why I got into it. I have a degree in English, but there's a lot more planning and administration that goes into the process. So I'll go through some of that. Just a little bit more about me. This is my family. This is why we all work, isn't it? So I just wanted to introduce you to my family. This is my partner, Paul. He's a history professor, and I have 4 children. And they are in 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. And they're an awful lot of fun and quite a bit of work, as I'm sure many of you know.
Did you say 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade?
Yes. Yes.
You are brave.
We're a blended family, and so far so good. So. This is on a hike that we took on the North Shore. But this is, this is why I work. My education, kind of what brought me into this career was I started out in book publishing. I have a degree in English literature and always liked books and writing. I have a certification in book and magazine publishing, so like literature and writing. And then I took, so I started out in Chicago working for a book publishing company. And then a friend of mine in college introduced me to the environment, and I became very passionate about the environment, and I wanted to work for nonprofits to further that cause. And it sounds like you all have causes that you're interested in. Healthcare sounds like one of them. And so there is, so I got a job at a nonprofit organization, and if you've ever worked for a nonprofit organization, you learn an awful lot about many facets of running a nonprofit. One of which, of course, is fundraising, because nonprofits run on a pretty thin budget. So I learned a lot on my own about grant writing just by doing it. And I know it's an overwhelming, it seems like an overwhelming process, but once you jump in, the best way to learn it is just to do it one grant at a time. It never goes perfectly. You get rejected a lot. It's for people who do grant writing, pretty high motivated people, but you get rejected more than you get accepted, and you just have to get used to that. In fact, the success rate in the world I work in, which is mostly competitive grants, is anywhere from 3 to 20% success rate. So if you're failing, you're doing an excellent job. A little bit about how we got started doing what we're doing. We have always had grants at Northland College, but we were very successful at getting some big grants through the Environmental Protection Agency. And those are pretty overwhelming grants to maintain. And so there was this need. All of a sudden we had some success bringing 2 of those in. They were each about $300,000. And we needed someone to administrate them. And at that time I was working in fundraising, just in annual giving fundraising, and doing a little bit of corporate foundation work with grants. But we needed someone to help administrate these. So and at the same time this was happening, those grants were we pursued through the Sigurd Olson Environmental Institute, so that activity had increased. And we also have brought in a lot of new, very active faculty in research. And so those things were happening at the same time, and so we established my office, and I started doing it part-time, 65% time, while also serving as alumni director, which was a little bit crazy. And then I was able to go completely to grants after that. So this slide is to point out that we really needed this sort of cultural support amongst all the administrators too. And it sounds like from, I wouldn't be standing here if we didn't have this kind of cultural support. But this just shows you how we've grown over time. We have about 40 active awards in-house. My supervisor has said to me that she used to work at St. Scholastica, and we do about 3 times, well, there's 3 people who do what I do at St. Scholastica, and so we're quite active, and we're maintaining, you can see we dropped a little bit here, but we're trying to maintain keeping 40 active grants in-house. And these are just what I call our competitive grants, our government grants. We do have an Idaho counterpart who works in corporate and foundation relations, and she does a little bit different kind of grant pursuits than I do. Here's where the definition of terms comes in. So in the world that I work in, the sponsored projects office, and this just shows the difference between the two different kinds of grant pursuits. This is generally research and scholarship and outreach. And our corporate and foundation relations person focuses on the same areas, but she's also bringing in some money for student scholarships and general operations. So you'll see this kind of division at a lot of different schools. I'm not sure what your goals are here with grants. It sounds like Ken and Kelly do most of this kind of pursuit, but I'm working with government entities, and Christie's sources are these corporate and private foundations. And these are terms that you'll hear a lot about. The term grant is used quite often, but I also there's also money that can be brought in to support your organization through contracts and through different kinds of agreements and what we call subawards. And I'll explain those terms in a little bit. But the process, the difference between the processes of mine is a little more complex. Our funders want specific things done with a defined set of deliverables, and there's a lot of compliance requirements with the federal grant, especially our state grant. There's a lot of reporting and things that you just have to make sure happen so that you don't get in trouble with your auditors. Whereas here it's a little less complex. You have more relationships, you're meeting with funders, and I'm not doing that so much as Christy does, so she's meeting one-on-one with people and developing relationships. It does help in government work, but it's a little, you don't see that quite as often. Any questions about that, or? This just goes into a little bit of detail about the different kinds of funding mechanisms that I described before. Contracts, it's you're procuring a service, and we see that here for other services that you're procuring for food and maintenance services, that kind of thing. But we do that with grants as well, with contracts, where we have a lot of researchers who say work with the National Park Service, and the National Park Service wants some sort of survey done, and so they will contract with us, and we'll put together a proposal. So it's a little bit atypical, but it is grant work, and it's a way that we're exchanging money between our organizations. So these are transactions of money, property, services. We also have grants where we're procuring a piece of equipment that will help our science faculty, for example. Some of the other types of agreements that I work with that sort of fall under this grant title are always different kinds of agreements. So what I'm trying to convey here is that it's a little bit broader than grants. There's ways to exchange money and support your organization through different kinds of agreements. So I don't know if you're in your community work, you might be looking at some government sources, and there's other ways to find out that kind of information. So these are just samples of, with the United States Forest Service, we work with these participating agreements. These kinds of agreements are where the Forest Service, they're involved in the work in the way we are. So they might be setting some guidelines about the type of survey instrument to use, for example, and we're carrying that out. Same with the cooperative agreement. So these are just all different kinds of names of agreements that you might see that fall under sort of the grant title. And this would be a private agreement, and a memorandum of agreement just is it's something you can find a template for online, and it's a way to exchange money and services with a private funder. Subawards is a good way to, at Northland College, because we're a small institution, and we will work with larger institutions who will grant us subawards. We also sub money down to other organizations. So for example, if Gogebic and our institutions were to work together, Maybe you have a faculty member who offers something that we don't have, and we have a faculty member who contributes something to the project. We might work together, and maybe we received a federal award that would bring money to us, and then we would sub-award that down to you and create a partnership. So that's another sort of financial exchange. Any questions about those terms? Sort of boring, but things that you'll see if you keep working in this field. And then I was going to run through 6 slides. This is the fun part, because this is why we do this work, right? It's to see change happen, to educate students, to make a difference in our communities, whatever your purpose is for pursuing grants. These are some things that we have going on at Northland College now or recently that I wanted to give you an idea of the sourcing for funding these projects and the funding mechanism for these projects. This is one of our chemistry faculty, and he's doing some very innovative research to turn a lot of plastics, once they're recycled, can only be reused into to remake soda bottles, for example. They can't be used for high-end uses, and he's looking at ways to recycle plastics for high-end use. So that's very exciting research. We've received a lot of funds from him right now. He's working under the American Chemical Society. This is a private source funding research, which a lot of people don't understand that there is a lot of private support for research now. The government and cutting back has cut back a lot of the sourcing on that. So we're looking to expand through different private sources. So the doors are very open to where you can look for grants, and that's one message I wanted to hope to convey to you too, is that it's a much broader menu than one might think of where to find funding.
Years ago, at a grant writing presentation, we were told there was a book in a library and you had to go to a specific regional library to find these kinds of sources. Is that available online now? I mean, is this kind of a source? Is there a...
Yes, I have it within my slides, sort of I'll get to that. If I don't answer that question, can you bring it up again there? But
Thank you.
you're welcome. So, this funding mechanism is called a grant. And this particular professor works with a lot of undergraduate students too, so this is how we're funding some of our undergraduate research, which has been a big draw to increase our enrollment and retention. We have 12% of our students who are working on a sponsored project and are getting paid to do it. And some of them have even been authors on papers, so it's really exciting. This is an example. We work with tribal governments, and Recruiter Ray has worked with us on a Purple Blue Stripe survey. And this is through a subcontract, as I was referring to before. They have federal funds coming to them. The tribes have access to sources of federal funds that we would not qualify for. But if we can offer an element to help with the project, we will work with the tribes and complete that element, work together. There's a lot of exciting collaboration, and I think one reason why I was asked to come here is we're hoping to collaborate more with your institution as well. So there are connections we can make or ways we can work together. Certainly, we no longer have nursing at our college, unfortunately. Another project that we've been working on recently, this kind of shows how several organizations can come together to fund a project. This is something that you don't always think about, that it's just one source, but these are multiple sources that came together through a long period of project planning prior to grant writing to talk about the needs that we needed to survey some amenities in the Ashland area to see what we had to offer for our community members, what was lacking, and to respond to need in the area. So these organizations have come together, a private source, a municipal source, 2 private sources, and a state source to fund this work, hiring our faculty and students to do this survey work that's going to come out in a report and inform the community and will be useful for chambers of commerce and our chamber of commerce for sure. So. Another project is through the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program. This is a county, the county has employed us to hire students to stand at boat launches and ensure that Eurasian milfoil and zebra mussels and things like that are adherent to boats. And so this is great experience for our students, and developing all kinds of relationships for us. We do assess a small overhead fee to house this because our students are on our payroll. We're paying faculty to oversee this, that kind of thing. So it's a great way for Northland College to make relationships, to earn a little bit of money. It's not a huge money-making endeavor, to give our students great experience, and of course the point is to do something good for the world. So. We also do, this is kind of falls into some of you work in outreach, student life and that, and I also help acquire grants for our outreach entities at the college. This program is a program in the summer that's held on the Northland campus for middle school students, students primarily from disadvantaged populations, low-income students, and this source is a state source funded through a grant. So just wanted to give you a perspective of different kinds of things that are going on at Northland, and hopefully a little inspiration. I like to end on this example because this was one of our early EPA grants that recently closed. It's a federal source called an assistant grant. And this is what makes me feel like a lot of my job, I do a lot of administrating, a lot of sitting in the office, writing, checking budgets, balancing budgets, just writing reports, that kind of thing. And do I make a difference? But this is 750 cubic yards of cow manure that was removed out of a floodplain, and that work happened because of a grant. It's something I feel proud about. A visual demonstration of how my work has some significant impact. Any questions about those, or?
I'm sure you'll probably talk about it, but you have monies for all these, doing these projects, but there's an army of people that need to oversee this stuff. How do you pay for those people?
It's a good question. We write that into the grant. So as we're planning a grant, that's one thing we're looking at, is we're looking at that's why the planning is such a huge part of it. We're looking at every element of what is this going to take to make this happen, to ensure, a sponsor of a program, they want to know that you're well planned so that you've asked for enough money, not too much money, but enough money. So, and we'll go through, I can go through that in a little bit too, with the different elements of the budget. It's a good question. And this term grant writing, I'd love to think I'm a grant writer. I probably spend 15% of my time writing, and the rest of my time puppeteering, overseeing, administrating. Grant writing, really, there's not one grant writer. When you get together, and it sounds like you all in the back row in nursing probably find yourselves on a grant team, putting your heads together about how to get this project done, assigning different elements out. So it's definitely a team effort, which is what makes it kind of fun, and it becomes a better project when you have input from many people. In fact, I work with a lot of faculty, and they have, I'm a generalist. There's no way I could write about the chemistry research that Dr. Robertson writes about. My background is in English. I can write grants on certain things, but there are expertise areas at our college that I certainly cannot write about without a lot of help. I will often serve as editor for some of those, but we'll often have a lead writer in those disciplines. And my role is to do a lot of these other things. I will help with planning. I research funding opportunities. I can write, edit, and proofread. When we get an award there's a lot of negotiation of what's in the award, and so I will do that work. And then budget management is a big part of it. If there are two things that I make sure that I definitely check off is to make sure that every grant proposal we put in fits our institution's mission. I think that's a really important element. You want to make sure that you are doing something in line with the mission of your organization. And you want to make sure you don't lose your shirt in the process. So the budgeting is a huge element of it. Prior to my coming on at Northland College, we had grants. They were all over campus. They were run by individuals, many of them well, some of them not so well. Often Northland found themselves paying out the rest of their grant because we didn't budget well enough. So we actually lost money keeping this project on campus, or we didn't budget out for maintaining it. And so we've had to maintain it at a cost. So that budgeting is something that you want to be very careful about to make sure that it helps your institution and doesn't hurt it. And then ensuring compliance. Every sponsor has different compliance rules and regulations, so that happens on an individual level, and that's my role, or any grant manager's role, is to ensure that you're doing what the sponsor has asked you to do, and also carrying out the work plan that you've agreed to. This is my feeling that the more grant writers you have on campus, the better. I have a lot of, everything filters through my office ultimately before it goes out, but I will often rely on a lot of other people to do writing and drafting and that. So. Any questions? So this is step number one, and like I said, it sounds like you have a culture of support going here for pursuing grants, and there's certainly, as I said, there's a lot of need. There's always more need than money out there, and a lack of things to change in the world. We at Northland College, we're in a position now, we have grown so fast and furious, and as Kelly said, we've increased our awards in-house by more than 200%. We have a lot of faculty doing a lot of research, working with students. But now at this 5-year point, some of our faculty teach a lot as well. They have, in fact, they have high teaching loads compared to other colleges our size. And some faculty are better at teaching, some are better at scholarship, some are pretty good at both. There's a little bit of feeling right now that we're pushing research a little too hard. Let's not forget about teaching. So you just want to make sure that whatever you choose to do is fitting in with the culture of where you want your institution to go. So that's something that we're starting to look at now to keep this in balance. Can we sustain this? And how much resourcing do we want to put into research compared to teaching? And then, of course, everybody at the college, I'm sure here too, has a number of service obligations, committees you serve on, other ways that can help. So. Staffing to support this kind of work is helpful. A role like mine, also I rely a lot on our business office to do some of the accounting and budgeting. We work together. I work with a project manager on budgeting, but all the bills get paid and the expenses get accounted for through the business office. So that is a high need that you want to make sure you have some support for. The other support, these are things, incentives that we haven't done yet at Northland. We would like to in order to keep our activity, high, or however high we decide we want it to be, is we've talked about compensating people for pursuing grants. It doesn't sound like, some of you are faculty, but some of our faculty feel like if they were compensated a little in the summer for this, that they could pursue more grants and thus bring in more funds for the institution, complete more work, give students more opportunities. So those are things that we're talking about. Or doing course release for them, or using some of our indirect cost recovery to support different programs. So if you needed some sort of piece of equipment, like chemistry, we could bring in some of that money possibly through our indirect recovery and support it that way. And then we've also talked about incentives to encourage this through having kind of celebrations for grants that get acquired. And we do this on a small basis. When a grant comes in, I'll put out an announcement and a board, we'll put out different lists of people who've accomplished this, because this is quite a lot of work, and it is something that helps the institution. And then some of these might go without saying, but the benefits that we've seen by increasing this kind of work here would be faculty development. It certainly provides opportunities for our faculty to do more scholarship and more research, and we don't have many other ways to support them. So this has been a positive thing. There's an article that I provided you on the benefits to, this might be something to pass along to the dean here. This blue one, blue and yellow one. Another kind of form, pursuing a grant can be very helpful in developing your organization or developing your research idea. You'll find working for the schools that just getting these ideas down and talking to other people about them is about 3/4 of the work towards pursuing a grant. So this is kind of inspirational for that, for just the process can be very helpful too, even if you end up without a grant in the end. And a lot of times you can go back the next year, you can get feedback from the foundation that can help you. Just don't be afraid to ask for feedback, that they can help you do a better grant next time around. So it's not a futile process, even though the reward, the immediate reward is kind of low. It's difficult to get. The undergraduate research, as I said, we have 12% of our students who have undergraduate positions on grants, and we've found that they when students, and I'm sure go give it too, but when they're tied into something at the institution, they tend to come back. So our students are making relationships with these faculty members, with contacts that are at the Forest Service, at the Park Service, contacts in the area with health services or wherever they are working. And so it's bringing them back to Northland. So we found that to be a good thing. Also, my office is housed in institutional advancement. Not all grant offices are housed there. Some are housed in business offices. But I see my role as a way of advancing the institution, making partnerships, putting our message out there about mission. But it is also, I can see how sometimes it would be housed in the business office because it is a money sort of churning endeavor. We are running a lot of money through the grants office. It's mostly for restricted purposes, but there's a lot of money going there. Other offices are housed in academic affairs because so much of my work is with faculty. So you see it housed in different places. So I mentioned the ways that it can help with institutional advancement, reputation and partnership building, faculty retention and student retention, and staff retention. In student affairs, I know that if I'm getting support, or my student affairs staff are getting support in the projects that they want to pursue or think are important, that's a helpful thing too. Capital improvements, we often bring in equipment through grants. We might have a research project that has an element that is equipment and supplies that are needed, so that will help us keep our equipment upgraded and updated. And then, as I mentioned, the cash flow is helpful. That when we're looking at something like refinancing at Northland or moving our debt around, they often come to my office and want to know sort of how much cash we're moving, because that shows that other people trust us, we have partnerships, and we're good on our word. So step 2 in this process is the planning. And as I alluded to, this is a book that I use a lot, so it's a source that you could look at, called Winning Grants Step by Step. And Min Carlson says, generally organizations will spend about 80% of their time planning a project and 20% writing and packaging a proposal. And I have to say that is absolutely true. And I have 5 slides here that have to do with planning and one that has to do with writing. So much of your work gets done in the planning process. So these are initial questions that that are helpful to look at as you're starting to think about what the need is, what you want to address. So that's the most important. What is the need? What is the problem that you're trying to resolve? Or what is the research question? Because that's what a funder is going to respond to, is they want to make a difference. It's a partnership. You want to make a difference. They want to make a difference. You want to make sure that that is something that you agree on and you're both happy and can move forward with that. So that's the initial thing to look at, is what are you trying to change? And secondly, as I said before, does this fit your mission? A funder will look at that. They will want to know that what you're doing fits with what your institutional, organizational goals are. Another good question to ask is, are there organizations, researchers working on this? This is often a question that you'll see on a grant application, because a funder will want to know that this is not already being addressed in your community, thus they'd be duplicating efforts. So they would want to know, have you looked at other people that you could collaborate with to make sure that you're not overlapping, or that you could work together, and maybe this other organization provides one element of a project that you want to do and you provide another one. Could you work together? Or maybe they could provide a letter of support. So that's a question that you're always going to see, is have you looked at the environment around you? Have you done an environmental scan to see, to make sure you're not duplicating efforts? Do you have a question? And then who comprises the grant team? So just putting together in your head, I just pulled together a team. We're meeting in a couple weeks about improving we have a need in our area, which I'm sure is probably similar here, for a lack of early childhood educators. And so we found a grant that will help us improve our articulations and increase being able to train teachers in that area. And so it's an interesting group of people made of our admissions director, our transfer coordinator, our corporate foundation relations person, the director of the education department, our communications director, because part of this would require getting the word out about this so that we can increase the number of students coming into this program. So just sort of thinking through who could possibly be helpful, what kind of information could be contributed from all these different people. That's sort of the overarching planning questions to be asked, really even before you get started looking at sources. Any questions about those or comments? And these are other planning questions. And these questions are meant to address things that you will see for sure in grant applications. A funder's going to want to know what your goals, strategies, objectives, tactics are. I'm not going to go into that. You can all research, how is a goal different from an objective, that kind of thing. But you're going to want to address those. And the objectives are, of course, measurable things to address your goals. You're always going to see that in a grant application. Second question is that you're going to have to show how you evaluate whether this worked, whether your proposal, what you're proposing to do worked. So that's something to think about in advance too. So you've got a bunch of measurable objectives out there. How are you going to know that they worked? And then another element, of course, is what is the project and program going to cost? And we'll look at that in a little more depth, because I think that's really important to make sure that you're not losing money here. And then is this a project? Oftentimes a funder will say, we will fund you for 1 year, but we'd like to see you continue this for 5 years. How will you maintain this project? Because they would be willing to invest in something if they saw that down the road it was going to continue, and other people in your community were going to put money into it and support into it, or that your institution also wanted to commit to it. So that's another question to look at. Is this something you want to do for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years, for every other year? And what would it require to make that happen, so that you can guarantee to the funder that you'll be able to carry out what you say you're going to carry out? And just a quote from that same book about the budget. The budget is a plan you have for the project or organization expressed in the language of dollars. Any questions about that slide? So as your, this is what your question was referring to. So oftentimes we'll sit down with a grant team and we'll just sort of brainstorm, what is this gonna take? And sort of think through all the elements of the project, what we wanna accomplish, you know, what kind of, who are the people we're gonna need? Are they gonna need to be paid? What are they gonna need to be paid? Are there taxes and fringe benefits we might need to pay on them? Do they need to travel? That's gonna be a cost. Do they need training in order to accomplish this? So we need to send them somewhere to get training. It's just really thinking through all the different elements of what you wanna do. And your budget should ultimately show a balance of revenue and income and expenses. So as I said before, a funder wants, they don't wanna see you, they wanna see your budget balanced. They don't wanna see you making money off of this, and they also don't wanna see you fall short. I love this quote: "A lot of nonprofits take pride in modest budgets, modest approaches, but I don't want to make an investment that doesn't have a prayer of succeeding." So a lot of people do sort of shy away from, I mean, put it out there, put out what it is really going to cost you. And even, you know, I never over budget, but for example, if you're going to hire personnel for 1 year and maybe inflation is going to cause you to need to pay them a little higher the next year, make sure that's in there. So budget for what you think are the real costs, and don't be shy about that. Other things to think about budgets. These are titles of types of budgets that will often be asked for in grant applications. They might ask for what they would call a program or a project budget, so specific to what it is that you're proposing. But within, and this happens to us at Northland all the time, and then they also want to know, what is Northland College's income and expense budget for a certain fiscal period? And that's to show that wherever this project or program is going to be housed, how does the institution handle their money? Because if the institution doesn't handle their money very well, it's not very likely that a program housed within the institution. So it's a great thing so that you can show that your institution has a strong financial background too. The budget detail or justification is your budget written up in a narrative form. So you might say travel is $2,000, but they're going to want to know, what does that $2,000 comprise? Is that, you know, 2 trips to Chicago plus the train fare back and forth to the meeting site? So you really have to write out the detail of what your budget comprises. So you'll often see a budget justification required. And then an in-kind budget would be anything that's contributed to the project that's not a cost to you. So someone might contribute their time, someone might contribute a meeting space for free, lots of different things that can be contributed that way, and that has a value. And internal budgets are something that, so the first bullet is all the external budget, types of budgets that you might be asked for in a grant. And internal budgets are something that even if the sponsor does not ask for an external budget, I require an internal budget because I want to make sure that we have enough money to do what we said we would do, and that so we have enough money to hire students, and we have enough money to send people where they need to go. So it just helps us as we go along, and it makes the whole management of your grant so much easier if you're following a budget that you've developed in-house from the very beginning, that you've all agreed upon from the very beginning, that it's strong and from the very beginning. And the next box just shows a little specifics. A lot of people have questions about what in-kind contributions are. They're not always required in grants. They're sometimes required. They can sometimes be referred to as match or cost share. So a funder, this is something to watch as you're looking at guidelines. And places that we and other people have gotten into trouble is that maybe it's a one-to-one match. Maybe that it's a $10,000 grant, but you have to come up with $10,000 of cost share on your own. Sometimes that's cash, sometimes that's people's time. There are creative ways that you can come up with this, but just something to watch. In-kind contributions do demonstrate the full cost of what it's gonna take to run a project, so it's important to include them. And it also demonstrates that you have people that wanna support you, so if you're getting a facility donated from your local, Chamber of Commerce or something, that shows that organization is supportive of what you're doing. And then in-kind contributions are reported as income and expenses in budgets. For example, sometimes it's a little bit hard to explain and understand, but so if someone is giving you $5,000 worth of food, they're donating that for you to put on an event. That is an in-kind contribution to you, but it's also something that you're spending out because you're then going to put this food at your event. So it's something that has to balance in a budget. Any questions about budgeting? Anybody heard the term indirect costs before I walked in today? It's a kind of a confusing thing, can be confusing. So I put a slide up here about what are direct costs and what are indirect costs. So when you're putting a project budget together, you have, you can itemize on the left here things that are specifically related to that project. You have a student and a faculty member working on a project. You're going to contract somebody to do some backhoeing on a project. You might need to purchase equipment, supplies, that kind of thing. You're going to specifically make a brochure that's going to advertise this project, anything that's directly tied to that project. You're going to send somebody overnight to Chicago to get training in order to carry out this project. However, all these projects also have sort of hidden costs that are shared across the institution. We have 40 active projects going on at Northern College right now, and they share the things that I offer for those projects, the ways that I can help with those projects. We share payroll, we share snow plowing, from parking lot people come in. We share electricity costs, all kinds of different costs that are shared that are really hard to tease out exactly how much that is. What does it cost to shovel the parking spaces for the 4 people working on that project? It's just too hard. So we assess a percentage, and we put that in a grant application as much as we can to try to cover those costs, which are actual costs of carrying out these projects and housing these projects. So when you're outlining direct costs in a budget, sometimes a grant, sometimes a grant will say you will pay for supplies, but no equipment over $5,000. You can't apply for that in this grant. Or I've seen, we'll pay you for student wages, but we won't cover their payroll taxes. So those are things that to just carefully watch for. What are the exclusions in the guidelines? Also, to get, oftentimes a grant will require, if you are going to purchase a $5,000 piece of equipment, you're going to want to provide an estimate for that piece of equipment to show that that's something that you didn't make up. So just something to keep in mind. And also using a timeline for when these direct costs will be paid out. We're talking a year, 6 months, and sort of start and end dates. Indirect costs, as I said, are actual costs. Sometimes they're referred to in all these other ways. One of the flyers I gave you is about indirect costs, and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek article, because often you will see that funders will not allow indirect costs, so they'll have caps or limits on indirect costs, and they are true costs. And this article is it's from a blog called Nonprofit with Balls, and she talks about the different ways that indirect is referred to, also as overhead. I think these are, she says, overhead sounds like something you want to remove from your face. Blemish be gone, guaranteed to get rid of blackheads, whiteheads, and overheads in just 3 days and keep your skin looking youthful and radiant. But these costs are ways that they are critical to being able to support these projects. So The other funny way that it's referred to is here is things we need to do in order to do our jobs and make the world a better place. Damn it. And that's an acronym. TWNODOJMWDD. So just that's a question that gets a lot of, that's something that it's sometimes hard to convey why this is important to be able to, so that we can house these projects at our institution. Any questions about indirect costs? Or, we have a federal indirect rate, which sounds really high, but we only use it on federal grants, and it's you have to apply through it through the Department of Health and Human Services. And so if we were lucky enough to get a federal grant in, we will be able to assess 52% on just wages. So any personnel that we put into our budget, we can help the institution by bringing in 52% of wages. Otherwise, the rest of the costs are completely restricted to the project. I never turn down a project that, say, doesn't have indirect costs associated with it, because there are so many other benefits to having the projects in-house, just for the experience of the students and faculty and the reputation of the institution. So that was planning. Any questions about planning or?
It does make it very clear why you need a team to do this.
Yes.
One person just doesn't have enough experience to cover all this.
Yes, it's true, and I still don't have enough experience, and I've been doing this for 20 years. I always rely on other people, and that's kind of part of the fun of it too, is bringing all those people together. But it takes time. Planning takes time, as we all know. Doing committee work and going to meetings is sometimes you think it's easier to do it yourself. So the third step is to do your research, and in the box here are the two. Well, let me just go back. I rarely do research for grant sources. They come to me at a rate that I cannot keep up with. Truly, I cannot keep up with it. And so if someone is looking for a funding opportunity, they will often come to me. But sometimes I will turn it back to them, especially with a faculty member, because they have contacts in their field that I don't have. They have graduate school mentors, they have colleagues that work at different agencies, they have colleagues at other schools who are doing exactly what they're doing, and they really have the best sources. So I often send them back to do a little bit of research on your own. So find out where your graduate school counterparts are getting their funding, because if they're getting funding to do exactly what you're doing or something very similar to you, that's a very good source. So I will often turn that back around. I don't know if that would apply for all of you in all your different cases, but it works for me a lot. They have professional associations that they're on listservs for, so they're seeing grant opportunities come that I don't have access to. And oftentimes, I will have faculty members come to me and they found this, and I'm like, and that's what happened with this recent one about the articulation improvement grant. And the faculty member in the Department of Education brought this to me. She said, someone has asked me to apply for this, and that's great. So we already have it in there. It's just a matter of doing the work, and she and I met, and we've divvied up projects, and we've got a grant team going. It's rolling now. So internal, external colleagues. There are also, I have a faculty member who that I sent out into our community to make contacts at the U.S. Geological Survey for the work that he's going to do. And there are even faculty members within the institution who, believe it or not, don't know what other faculty members are working on. And so I've sent them down the hall. and right now there are 3 faculty members who have a grant together, and I introduced them to each other, and now they have a grant together, and they didn't know what each other was working on. So I won't make any more comment about what that's about, but just sort of connecting the dots is really important. And then lastly, if I absolutely cannot find a source, there are searchable databases, and I put up here the 2 that I use the most often. for federal source and private sourcing. And you can look on these and find, you can put in, you know, by topic or region with different criteria of what you're looking for. If you're looking for public schools support, you're looking for healthcare, you can narrow down your searching that way. And most of these are free. The Foundation Center does have a level that you have to pay for. Even in what I do, I have not found that I need to pay for it. So. Just another slide about research. As I mentioned before, the most important thing about research is making sure that what you want to do fits with what the funder, what their priorities and goals are. And that's a really cool thing when that fits together and you find somebody who wants to fund. I mean, people want to give money away when they're giving it away in a way that meets their goals and objectives too, whether that's a private donor or a federal source. And their job is their job to give away money. And so they just have criteria that they need to fit. So when you can make that merit happen, it's really exciting. But other ways to determine that kind of fit is to look at people who are doing similar work, similar type of work, similar topics, similar scopes of work. You can go to any, if you get a tip from, these are 3 foundations that I've recently talked with program officers at, and we've had a grant team meeting, and we've had connections with these officers. And for example, the Charles Stewart Knott Foundation, I've looked at, the reason we got a conversation going with them is because we could narrow down that they worked to support projects like we want to accomplish. They give away amounts of awards that sort of fit the amount of money that we needed. They do grant to private colleges, so you can kind of narrow it down by just going to the foundation's websites. You can find out quite a lot of information about whether this is a fit for you or not. Talking with a program officer sounds like a scary thing. I have had grant meetings with faculty with all 3 of these just recently, which is why I put them up here. And my faculty are surprised by how much these people want to help them. So it's kind of neat to see that they really do. It is their job to give away money. So there's another article I gave you about talking with program officers, and no matter what you're working in, if there is somebody who's put their name out there as a contact for this grant opportunity, call them, meet with them if you can. I would vet them a little bit first, just so they know you did some of your research, but definitely have a conversation. It can be very helpful to getting your project funded. And eligibility requirements, the statistic I read recently is that 60% of grants fail because people didn't read the requirements. They didn't follow directions. I've heard of grants being rejected because you're not allowed to use the term at all in your bibliography, or because you use 12-point font instead of 11-point font. Nobody should make that mistake. So you just have to read carefully, ask someone to read carefully for you. The margins were off, whatever. So after all that work of all the team getting together, and to see a grant fail based on that is frustrating. And even though when I came to talk about grant writing, I have just one slide on writing. And this is a slide, I apologize if this is a little elementary for you, but I also talk to students. We have students at Northland College that I work with who want to pursue grants to fund things that they're interested in, or with groups that they volunteer with. And I've spoken to a class, economics class, and he said, "Oh, please emphasize the writing part, because I just can't get my students to listen to what I have to say about writing." So I've just put a few notes here about what to focus on with your writing to avoid the clutter and the jargon in writing. And there's this other, I think the last article here is about writing, about it's from the Chronicle of Philanthropy. and I like some of the quotes in it. On the first page, it says, "You have to be smart to convey difficult subjects in a clear, understandable prose." They talk a lot about jargon in here. He's got a funny one about using the word stakeholder, and the only person who lived up to that title was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So just kind of avoiding that kind of jargon is really a turn-off to foundations. In general, great for a lay audience. This is one I emphasize with students. Use the English language as it was intended, not as you use it for texting. Tell real-life stories. Review your work. Read it aloud. Edit, proofread. Ask someone else to review your work. Rewrite it as needed. I do a lot of writing, and I always read my work aloud. I always ask someone else to read it, and I'm always amazed by the mistakes that are found after all that. So it's good advice. It sounds really simple, but it works. And then to take Ernest Hemingway's advice about details make stories human, and the more human a story can be, the better. And that's really important when you're expressing the need in your grant. You're expressing the need for elementary ed teachers in the area, the need for better health care in the area, the need for whatever you need in the best of your schools. You want to tell that through people, through giving an example of how sparse the supplies are. And then just a re-emphasis of the first draft of anything is not one that we should use. So, if I can try to link to this. If I can get this is a video. It's a 2-minute video interviewing some grant reviewers at large foundations, and what they, what they emphasize is how, more than anything, is the clarity of the presentation of what you're putting in front of them.
Single biggest characteristic would be clarity. There's a tendency to believe that grant proposals need to be written with a lot of complicated language and a lot of stuff in them, that somehow we weigh them instead of read them.
I think the most important thing is to develop a good relationship with your foundation partners and understand what the foundation is trying to accomplish. We always want it to be a good fit, and so when we grant write, we sort of bend and twist and try to fit within the guidelines. The best chance for fitting is doing what you think is best for the community and finding the right foundation partners to make that happen.
A very good grant proposal for me is one that is well researched in terms of providing the background on the issue that the grant writer is wanting to address. But it also goes further than that and talks about how those who will be impacted will be included in the work.
So I think for me, it has to be something that has a very catalytic impact. So something that is going to really change and move an organization from where they are to something more significant.
One of the most dynamic and really standout things an organization can do is also articulate how they plan to learn. What it is that they're going to know a year from now that they don't know today. How they're going to take that knowledge of both things that went well as failures and use that to be a better organization a year into the future.
I love that video. To me, what's that?
do it by the pound.
Yeah. It makes it seem not so overwhelming to me to watch that video. It's like, it's not that hard. Just ask for what you need in a clear way and find the right people that want to do what you want to do and follow the directions, and you're likely to get money. So any questions about that or comments? Anybody feeling better about this? Yes, no?
Is there any difference between, like, if I was writing a grant, I'm trying to find money to take a group of students someplace. It's a pretty small, very narrow focus. Is there any difference between writing a small little thing like that and doing one that, like, I want to build a building and staff it type of thing?
The elements are the same, expressing the need, putting your objectives out there, saying how you're gonna, ensure it succeeded, putting together a sound budget. The elements are always the same, but they might want, a 5-page narrative of that or a 20-page narrative of that. Or they might want an organizational budget and a project budget, or maybe they just want a project budget. So that's the following the guidelines part of it, is the elements of all this are the same, generally the same, but each funder wants something a little bit different. So, does that answer? Anybody, any other questions? So unfortunately, it's not that much writing. We like to write, and so much of what my work is split up by what I call pre-award and post-award. Pre-award would be the research and the writing, and post-award would be the administration and the reporting, and the kind of overseeing the budgets. If I were to choose, I would get an assistant who could do the back end for me, because I think I'm better at the front end, and somebody else has more accounting training than I do. So just something to think about if you have other people that you're working with is who's the best at the different elements that are required. And then, I don't know if anybody's ever read this book. This book has been around for a while, but all I really needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. I just think this is a great book about, lessons about keeping your hands to yourself, playing nicely with others, saying please and thank you, and following directions. And following directions, as I said, people lose grants 60% of the time because they haven't followed directions. So meeting deadlines, if they say the grant is due at 5 o'clock, if you turn it at 5:01, 95% of the time it will be rejected. So, and in fact, so many of the online systems are electronic that you have no appeal with anybody about that. Don't ask for, if they say we limit our grants to $5,000, don't ask for $5,005. So it sounds simple, but it's amazing that these mistakes are made. So we, at Northern College, I'm very proud of our success rate. This is a statistic about the success rate right now, and this is from the Chronicle of Higher Education, that in sponsored research, and this is not necessarily corporate and foundation grant writing, but that this has dropped. This keeps dropping. The success rate keeps dropping because federal funds keep dropping, and it's just more and more people trying to fund more and more things, and less money out there. So it can be discouraging field to work in, especially if you're the kind of person who wants to achieve and do well. Just keep trying. And we recently were rejected on a National Science Foundation grant, and I was working with a faculty member who's never applied there before, and we did our best, and we got rejected, and the program officer, though, offered to meet with us, so we're going to have a conference call with her, and we're going to try it again and see what happens. So anyway, this is a pretty low success rate. At Northland, we actually have a really high success rate, and I think that's because I screen this stuff so well. We also have some niche areas that we offer that a lot of other colleges and universities don't because of where we're located. And we have a lot of just really interesting research going on, but our success rate is actually 80%. But I will not put in something that, a lot of people will put in something sort of as an exercise, and I won't put it in unless I think we can get it. So if I feel confident we can get it, I'll put it in, and that's why our success rate is so high. And I just don't have time to put in something that's
Trial.
yeah. So we screen that really carefully. That's really all I had to share with you. I would be happy to answer any more questions or be a resource if I can be as we think of things down the road. I noticed a couple of people walked in. Can you tell me what you guys do or what there's another woman behind you that just we all kind of introduced ourselves, so I was kind of curious what you all.
Oh, okay. I'm Bill Perkins, and I'm with the new forestry technology program.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, finding ways to get my students to interact with different levels of industry and government and things are pretty interesting for me. And we're a small institution, so money even for travel for like 10 students is a big deal. So grant writing for something on that level, or our new equipment the kids can use in the field. This is kind of what I'm doing.
We just established a forestry program at Northland. I don't know if you know that. But
I've met several of them.
excellent. That's it. And one of our faculty is becoming quite successful with grants. And so I see that all the time where people come together and they collaborate and they figure out a way to get what they would like to get done together. So, yeah.
My name is Serena. I teach chemistry here. I have actually kind of two different interests. One is on the chemistry side. I want to overhaul camp, like for the science majors and stuff. It's time to do a full rewrite of that class, and that's going to take a lot of time and stuff like that to do. So, maybe if there's some funding and some collaboration with some people that I can move forward with that on, I'd like to do. And then on the other side, we're growing a wellness program here, and so maybe if there's any opportunities for grants to help support that as well. That's been a very positive thing here. So I think some funding for that to continue it. So those are kind of the two things that we're looking at or thinking about, but haven't done anything towards in terms of money.
Is the wellness program something that would be new?
We already have one. It's been going on for 2 years now. But it's just kind of starting to, like I offered yoga classes to to faculty and staff this year. Like, so that was a new thing. Some other people have talked about maybe offering things as well in the future and stuff like that. And so looking at ways to maybe support that and like equipment for people who are doing things, or maybe travel going to different places and stuff like that. So just just thinking about that, because it seems like that's kind of like a topic that might be, it's growing, the idea of wellness and stuff like that in institutions and supporting that. So I was thinking there might be some grant opportunities maybe.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. Unfortunately, Northland just ended its wellness program. It used to be for credit for students, and that's how we paid for it. Any other questions?
Okay. Well, we do have a lunch that's provided outside, so if you have the time and you want to stay, bring the food into here and eat it, you're welcome, and then have your own discussions amongst each other, maybe share some ideas. And Lisa, you're still here, so definitely tap her as, she's an excellent resource, taking advantage of that while we can would be my suggestion, very subtle, but hit her up for stuff.
I can stay till 1, so I'm happy to.
Okay, yeah, and if those of you that are on schedule, if you wanna, take your lunch and do what you need to do, but if you can stay and share some conversations, that would be great. And I just wanted to give Lisa a round of applause. Thank you for taking the time. It's always more helpful to talk to somebody who's done it, so, there you go.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. And we can still do questions and answers, so if you guys want to grab a sandwich and something to drink.
Hi.
Yes.
How are you? I'm good, how are you? Good.
Well, I've been getting all my
Research and grants for you, or just kind of status testing. Yeah. I just hit the 5-year. I know. I went to the.
I'll be here also.
I don't know, yeah, I don't know, I had to go to the heart or something a couple weeks ago.
As far as I know,
She was like, odd, I was like, suddenly I didn't know everybody. I had to go to the radiology, so, don't know that much, don't know that much. I came here in 2010. Yeah, because I remember I was still there when he came on board. I remember doing his.
Let me know if you like. I was like making sure the bank had a job if you passed the test. And
Now you just.
big on that. She knew what I meant.
Unfortunately, that's